YouTube, welcome back to the channel. You're watching Gunplay TV, and today on the table we've got quite a few things, but what we're looking at today is actually this watch from the guys at Kore Essentials. Now, if you're familiar with Kore, you'll know that they kind of got their name starting in the gun belt space, and they've begun to kind of foray into other supporting areas, if you will, around that firearms community, one of which, of course, includes this new timepiece. So, with all that being said, let's get straight into it and go through what exactly makes the Kore Essentials Eclipse special.
Reach for the sky.
All right, so as I mentioned in the introduction, this is in fact the Kore Essentials Eclipse. Now it's actually a chronograph dive watch, and it's going to come with two bands. I've got kind of the more dive inspired band on there at the moment. We'll take a look at what all comes in the box here in a bit. But again, this is a watch from the guys at Kore Essentials. Now, so again, most of us are at very least loosely familiar with Kore. If you've watched the channel in the past, I've featured a number of their products on the channel. I'll throw some videos up at the top and in the description if you'd like to check those out. However, one thing I can say about Kore is that they really pride themselves in taking innovation and blending that with quality to make products that are not only distinguished, but of, again, top tier quality. You might say a more superior product to what's out there and what's mass produced far too often here for the American economy. Kore, we mentioned before, right? Their background is in belts. They do also do wallets, sunglasses, ballistic sunglasses. In fact, I've got a video on that I'll throw up at the top, backpacks. And so again, they are really kind of branching into that EDC space of the firearms industry. Now, why exactly would you go to Kore for a watch over Timex, Seiko, Sangen Instruments, and the like, right? There's a wide range of timepieces, all the way from your entry-level G-Shocks, all the way up to, of course, your Rolex, Patek Philippe, so on and so forth, right? This watch, of course, is going to be aimed at a slightly different demographic. We're not necessarily trying to tackle the luxury segment with a watch like this, but instead what Kore is looking to do is accommodate those individuals who are going to find themselves in the field. Whether you're an operator, a police officer, or just find yourself on the range quite often like myself, this is going to be a very durable and reliable timepiece. And we'll get into what exactly makes this special as we progress through the video. Now, I'll kind of go ahead and go through some of the high level features for this particular watch. It is, in fact, a Swiss made watch, so let that say what it will. Again, we're not talking top tier luxury, but if you know anything about Swiss, they make good stuff, right? So let that say what it will. Now, it is a quartz movement, so nothing crazy on the internals with this, no automatic movement. Those of you who are out there that are watch savvy and probably somewhat preparedness minded, like myself, you'll find automatic watches are very alluring, right? Kind of like the idea of being able to set a watch and wear it, and that be all the juice that it needs to keep it going in perpetuity, right? This, of course, is a quartz movement, which means it runs on a battery. Don't let that turn you away. Kore Essentials is saying that this particular watch will run for approximately 4 years on a single battery. Now, 4 years, of course, not a short amount of time. Again, that's going to be somewhat reassuring to those users that would have otherwise liked this to be an automatic watch. Again, 4 years, a pretty long time, and maybe enough to kind of alleviate some of that concern in not having an automatic movement. Now, as we can see up front, the glass is actually sapphire crystal. So if you know anything about sapphire, it has a very high level of clarity as well as a high level of scratch and crack resistance, right? We've seen sapphire used on smartphones, watches, right? Glass objects that are otherwise going to find themselves in high traffic areas and high traffic use cases. So certainly nice to see them go for a more premium material like sapphire. Now, of course, I did mention in the introduction that this is classified by Kore, of course, as a dive watch, right? So we would expect quite a bit of water resistance when compared to your run-of-the-mill timepiece that you find on the shelf at the mall. Now, this watch is going to be water resistant to 30 atmospheres, which is approximately 300 meters. And for those of us in America on the imperial system, that's approximately 900 feet. Now, I don't know about you, and I don't know about Navy SEAL operators, but I don't know that I'm gonna find myself in 900 foot deep open water. So that certainly does enough for me. Now, if for whatever reason you did find yourself at such a depth, the watch also features a helium escape valve, which opens up when the pressure inside the watch has reached a certain point to alleviate that pressure inside and helps to keep the internals ticking, right? This is something that you'll find on high-end watches. For example, the Rolex Ocean Master has a gas release valve. That's something, again, something of a high-end feature, and goes to show that this wasn't something that they just threw a bezel on and called a dive watch, right? So I'm certainly happy to see that. Now, as we're going through this, you'll probably see there are 2 additional complications on the watch face, right? We've got a second hand that's ticking away, and of course, the second function, which will be used when you are using the chronograph or timing a particular activity using the watch. We'll get into some of those functions here in a bit. However, I do want to call out that right off the bat, I like to see functional complications, right? It's far too often that you'll see watches that are made to look flashy and the additional hands or complications on the watch face are immobile. They don't work, they're not usable in any way, shape, or form, and Kore has ensured that that's not the case here. So all of the hands on the watch, I assure you, are functional, which for me and my OCD makes me happy. Now, I will say this watch is not cheap, and so it's reassuring that if I'm gonna come in paying $395 before tax, that Kore has really engineered this and really thought through a lot of the use cases and made sure that this is going to be a durable and reliable timepiece. Now, one thing that I do want to point out about this particular watch, right? We've covered all of the basics, the water resistance, the movement, the fact that it's battery operated. So now that we've kind of gone through the basics, right? The movement, the fact that it's battery powered, I really wanted to touch on some of the features that distinguish this watch from things that I've encountered in the past, right? Now, right off the bat, we'll notice, again, this is an all black watch, not something that's particularly flashy. In fact, it's very low profile, very subdued, and that's due to the black vacuum plated finish. Of course, if you're gonna be out in the field, you don't want a watch that's going to be reflecting light in a million different directions, potentially giving away your position, or what have you, right? And so again, I think that's part of the philosophy and design when Kore approached this particular watch. Keeping things matte, keeping things flat, and low profile, I certainly like to see that. Now that of course will also extend to the TPE or thermoplastic elastomer watch bands. Now you get 2 in the box, right? The first of which is very simple, very straightforward. In fact, it kind of reminds me of an old school G-Shock band, right? But as I flip these things over, we'll see again the magic, and this is again where Kore is differentiating themselves from the competitors. This will be reminiscent to some of you all. It's very much similar to what they put on their gun belts, right? That ratcheting system allowing somewhat infinite adjustability between sizing, right? Just like on a belt where you might find yourself a 1/4 inch beyond that next hole or the last hole, right? This system gives you adjustability in between those standard 1-inch belt holes, right? Same thing with the watch. If you've got a watch that has a buckle, very similar to a belt, right? You might find that one hole's a little too loose, but if you go down one more, it's a little bit too tight. And so Kore has implemented the same thing on their watches, which I am very, very happy to see. So on this particular watch band, again, this one's more scuba in design, but when applying the watch and putting it on your wrist, right, you simply insert and you'll hear that ratcheting down as you tighten it up. And of course, it's good and tight, and when you're ready to release it, there's a nice lever here. You pull that up and simply slide out. Now I will say, again, I've worn this watch for close to a year now, right? And I wanted to make sure that I gave this the proper amount of time for a good review, right? I wanted to put this through a number of use cases, right? Whether that be travel, working in the yard, getting out there and running some guns, taking it to competitions. I just wanted to make sure that I'd given it a fair shake and could say that this was a watch that I've used in my day-to-day, right? And I certainly can say that. Now, I would say that that band is hands down my favorite feature. But again, I mentioned the functionality of the watch, the fact that the complications and additional hands on the watch are in fact mobile and are usable. The same applies for the bezel. Now, for those of you who are familiar with dive watches, you'll likely be aware of how the bezel is used. So again, this feature is designed with divers in mind, but can be used in everyday life just the same. Now, what you can do is, again, rotate that bezel. We'll see that that rotates just fine. And of course, as with any legitimate dive watch, that only rotates in one direction, which is counterclockwise. The way that this is used, if you want to use this at home, and again, you don't have to be a diver to utilize this feature. You simply take that arrow and you line it up with the minute hand at its current position, right? And what that does is allows you the function of a quick glance timer anytime you peek down at the watch, right? And so when this minute hand finds its way up here, I'll know that it's been 15 minutes since I set that timer. Alternatively, if it reaches over here, 35 minutes, so on and so forth. That feature is designed for divers in mind so that they can accurately gauge how long they've been underwater and extrapolate that against how much oxygen time they've got in their tanks. But again, a usable feature and something that I like to see on a watch that's purpose-built. So let that say what it will. Now, as we take another look at this watch, again, finished in all black. This is 316L surgical stainless steel, 44 millimeter diameter on the face. And again, relatively thin at about 13 millimeters tall, right? It's a pretty low profile watch. Now, we're still on the topic of functionality. And again, kind of coming back to the desired use case, or at least the design philosophy from Kore, which of course involves keeping this watch as low profile as possible. Even the lume that they used at each of the hours on this particular watch are low luminescent. In fact, I'll see if I can roll in some footage. Even trying to charge this thing up with a high candela, high lumen output light, it doesn't glow too bright. And of course, you got to keep in mind the fact that this is potentially going to be used as a field watch, and you don't want your lume on your watch glowing so bright that it gives away your position under night vision or otherwise. So certainly some thoughtfulness in the design once more from the team at Kore. Now, again, this one is branded as a dive watch, which means water resistance, of course, and part of that is utilizing screw down crowns. Now, this is something that you'll see on many dive watches, right? From Rolex to Seiko, the ability to screw down a crown is something that's somewhat standard in the industry, and it helps to ensure that water resistance all the more. So not only is the primary crown screw down, right? As I screw this, we'll see it pop out. And at that point, I can pull it out further and adjust the time. Not only is that a screw down crown, but the additional function buttons are also screw down, right? So as I unscrew this and unscrew this, we've now got access to those additional timing functions. So we'll take a look at that here in a second. So again, it's going to be important to note that these additional function buttons are not going to be usable unless you've unscrewed that crown. Again, that's kind of a pain if you want to use them regularly, but again, it's thoughtfulness in design. If for whatever reason you leave these crowns unscrewed and were to find yourself in deep water or even shallow water potentially, you're inviting the possibility of water ingress. Of course, something that you don't want in any watch. Now, so what exactly do these particular function buttons do? Again, I mentioned that this watch has timing capability. So first thing we'll notice is that second hand, that primary second hand, I should say, has not moved since the beginning of this video, right? And so now that both of these crowns are unscrewed, I'll go ahead and show you how that works. What I can do is go ahead and press that top button, and we'll see that triggers the timer, right? And so this primary second hand is keeping time. If I wanted to, for whatever reason, stop the timer, simply press that button once more, and it pauses, it stops exactly at where it is. And of course, that secondary complication keeps the normal seconds counting as the watch continues to keep time. But for our timing purposes, right, the chronograph function of the particular watch, I can pause and resume that at any time, which is with another tap. So again, certainly useful in that regard, right? If you were to want to time a particular activity, you can do so here. Now, as that hand makes its way around the watch, we'll see that once it reaches the full minute mark, this second complication that we mentioned before will increment by 1 to say that it's been 1 minute, and so forth, right? And so you can see now that we've passed the minute mark, that's incremented by 1, and that'll continue to increment as long as I'd like for this particular timer to run. Now, if I want to stop this for whatever reason, I simply press that button once more. Again, it's paused, and I press the second button, which reset both those hands to the top of the watch. All right, so one other feature that this particular watch affords you with its chronograph function is what I like to call a lap timer, right? So we already went through how to start the timer, right? We'll give it 5 seconds, and we can quickly stop that timer again using that same first button. But if for whatever reason I wanted to pause the timer, right? Maybe as I record that lap time, but I want that timer to continue to run in the background, what you can use is the second button. So I will go ahead and start it off, let the timer go ahead and count through, right? And we'll stop it again here at 10 seconds, but using the second button this time, right? And so you can imagine a situation where you want to quickly record your time, but you want that timer to keep running in the background because you might have to record another time here momentarily. Now, as I've been talking, this particular hand is frozen at the 10. Again, this allows me to record the current timing. But at any time, I can resume the timer by pressing that second button once more. And we'll see that that second hand, it jumps up to its current point in the time count. And that allows me, again, to keep the timer running in the background as I pause, record a time, and get right back to my timer, right? So again, a very functional design with that chronograph. And again, I love a functional chronograph, whether I'm going to use it or not. I just like to know that the watch was designed to function and I don't have decorative elements on the face, right? Everything that you see on this face, every hand on this watch moves and functions as you would expect from a true chronograph. And certainly I'd expect nothing less for almost $400. Right, so I know that I've said a lot and kind of rambled quite a bit around this particular watch. I am by no means a watch snob or a know-it-all, but I will say that again, I've had this thing for going on a year, I wanna say 9 or 10 months now. It's quality, man. I've tried to beat this thing up. I've taken it into the ocean, deep water, or as deep as I'm willing to go rather, and the watch keeps on ticking, no pun intended. It's certainly a well-made watch, and considering it's coming from the folks at Kore, I may have been a little bit hesitant initially, right? This is not a brand that has a watchmaking heritage. However, as far as I can tell, they've hit it out of the park. This thing is durable, it's reliable, and frankly, this band is top tier, right? Again, allows you to adjust from 20 plus size positions, and frankly, it should accommodate pretty much all wrist sizes. Kore says from 5.75 inches up to 8.13 inches in circumference. I don't know whose wrist is that big, but this watch will support it. So with all that being said, y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and get up out of here. Please go down in the comments, let me know what you think about this particular watch. Would you consider Kore Essentials for your next duty watch? Let me know in the comments. And again, if somehow you made it this far in the video and haven't already subscribed, I'm gonna ask that you pause this video now, scroll down, find that subscribe button, and once you found it, go ahead and give that a click for me. I do appreciate it. With all that being said,